This is the Queensland Country Hour with Amy Phillips on ABC Radio Queensland.
Hello Friday. Soon I'm going to bring you a story about the CSG industry interacting with farming, but this time not one of conflict, but mutual benefit.
It's given us opportunity to improve our farm, make it safer, make it actually more enjoyable farming, because there's that bit of guaranteed income coming in which we've never had before in our lives.
And farming of virgin country in our state's far north is also being met with mixed reactions, but soon you'll hear a bumper crop is firming up that region's irrigation potential.
During our stage 2, we're going to be building a storage, hopefully. We get that passed sort of in the next month, and then we'll be able to store water and then irrigate, more successfully, in the coming season.
Also, we're going to head to the far west, where school kids aren't sitting around at home. They're learning how to shear. That's all coming up, but first up today. Cast your mind back to March the 1st, when Cyclone Niren's winds unleashed fury on Innisfail, Tableland and Mulgrave region farms. And despite, of course, being all the months later that we have found ourselves now in July, local impacted farmers are yet to receive the full relief grants they were promised. Tom Major explains the situation banana, sugarcane and other affected farmers find themselves in.
Farmer Ned DeSalvo has been farming south of Innisfail for 40 years and been wiped out by cyclones many times before. But never before has the second generation banana grower experienced such a long wait for help while replanting and repairing his property after his entire fruit crop was wiped out by Cyclone Niren, and he's still in the dark even after repeated questions to his local Q-Rider regional manager.
I have been hit several times, 4 or 5 times. This is the 5th time I've been hit. We've always received our money from the government quite easily. This time round, it's just like as if they set it to shut us up, and it's just been left on the back burner. It's not coming. It's not happening. So I don't think they're any more in the know than what we are, because it's the government you're dealing with, So the government bodies. So some answers would be nice, considering this money was supposed to be made available months ago. You know what I mean? We're talking 100% wipeout. We're still a long way off before we really get back on our feet. I really don't know. I'll be honest with you. We need that money just like everyone else does. You know what I mean? It's been announced to come forward, and we still haven't seen it.
It's the new financial year now. Does that make things more complicated, do you believe?
Oh, look, I think the longer it goes, the more we're going to be asking questions where this money goes, because we've all outlaid monies to keep our business going, being reassured by the government that we're going to get reimbursed for these monies. It hasn't happened.
$25,000 grants were paid in the weeks after the windstorm, but on April the 30th, more than 2 months ago, Ministers for Agriculture David Littleproud and his state counterpart Mark Furner promised Category D grants of $75,000 to help those impacted primary producers get back on their feet as soon as possible. Hinchinbrook MP Nick Demetto says farmers have waited long enough. He's hit out at the state government, which he says is holding the process back.
Unfortunately, after the $25,000 was made available, it seems that the $50,000 has been caught up. And what we're calling on the state government right now is for them to unlock that. If there's a little bit of bureaucracy that's holding this back, if there's a tick in the box that needs to happen, we're urging the minister to make sure that this actually happens as soon as possible, because we've got people that are out there that are just trying to rebuild.
4 months on since Cyclone Niren formed, why has this become such a saga? Why is this delay affecting growers still?
I continue to lobby in this way. If it was happening in Brisbane, it would have been ticked off 4 months ago. But it seems that sometimes things get lost in the system when it comes to North Queensland issues, and sometimes people get forgotten. There's a lot going on in the state right now, and I appreciate that.
What's in the letter you've written to State Ministers Stephen Miles and Mark Furner?
So the letter is pretty clear. We're just calling on the state government to do all they can to ensure that this funding is unlocked and distributed to those growers. We understand that the funding has been made available, and now we just want the state and the feds to work closely together to make sure this gets to the people that need it the most, the growers that need to rebuild.
Back on the farm, Ned DeSalvo says he's doing what he can, replanting his crops and buying banana bags for the next harvest, all expensive things that the relief cash will never cover in total. But he's still flat out at understanding the reasons behind such a lengthy delay.
most of the banana bags are damaged in the cyclone. And your growing costs, of course, you know what I mean? Your fertiliser and your chemicals, of course, to grow your crop. Wages is your biggest killer that's killing us because there was no JobKeeper announced that they wouldn't help us with JobKeeper. So, yeah, it's been a battle.
And after spending time and money cleaning up, investing money in rebuilding his business just as he was urged to, Mr DeSalvo hopes that investment hasn't been in vain.
We've got strict protocols to follow to get this money. It's not that we can spend it on whatever. We've had to spend it on irrigation or banana bags, and most of us have done that because of the damage we've received. But we still haven't seen a cent from the government to reimburse us from this money.
A very puzzled Ned DeSalvo, who is now waiting more than 4 months since Cyclone Niran wiped out his banana crop. That's waiting for some help from the state government. In a statement to the ABC, a spokesman for Agriculture, Minister Mark Furner, who was not available, but in a statement said eligible producers impacted by Cyclone Niran can be assured that this funding will be provided as promised. It requires a regulation which will be finalised in coming weeks. Those that have already received assistance will be immediately informed when the higher limit can be processed. There's no word on why the regulation has taken more than 2 months to be processed by the Agriculture Minister's staff. And just further to that, farmers in the Gundawindi Regional Council area were also eligible and are still eligible for the $75,000 grant after flooding rain wiped out some of the first crops those growers had planted after a long drought. Now, their local LNP member for Southern Downs, James Lister, says the regulation changes being referred to, in fact, take days at best to achieve, certainly not months, as has been the case in this situation. He says in great news, Texas on the southern border has received 2 inches overnight. He's on his way to Stanthorpe and says the creeks along the way have been flowing.
I started in Tubia this morning, which is 50 kilometres west of Gundawindi, and it rained most of the way to where I am now, which is just west of Stanthorpe. And obviously, you know, the rains we had earlier combined with the good soaking over the last few days has been fantastic. It's green, water's flowing in the gutters down the sides of the roads. I've seen creeks flowing that I've never seen flow in my time as the member before, so it's great.
Whereabouts are those creeks? That's exciting.
Yeah, the creeks that flow on the road between Stanthorpe and Inglewood, some of the ones which contribute towards Coolmunda Dam, and to see them flowing above the layer of the gravel on the bottom is a terrific sign.
And are most dams full? What's the country look like from a water perspective?
Well, not everybody's dams are full. It depends on where the rain's fallen. Obviously, on the granite belt, you're looking at ephemeral streams and so forth, and they only flow when there's rain falling on them. But most, people who are involved in farming have had the rain that they need for winter crops or to fill dams for horticulture in the next season coming up.
James Lister, it was only a mere months ago that part of the world received some pretty significant rain and quickly, which put a flood down the local creeks and rivers. How disappointing is it that government assistance promised months ago still hasn't been delivered?
Yeah, Amy, look, I only learned this from you when we were talking earlier. And, from what I understand, the Commonwealth has made the funds available to assist producers who've been impacted by that event. If the advice I've received is correct, then the state government, that is, really needs only Cabinet to endorse a minute and get the governor to sign off on it. If it's just a regulatory thing, they don't even have to go back to Parliament. So if they're holding up the flow of funds from the Commonwealth, which is what I've been told, that's disappointing.
Yeah, regulation needs to be passed. Regulation changes need to be made before the funding can roll out. I've never heard of this. Have you?
Yes, what they're talking about there is regulation is a form of subordinate legislation, so it doesn't need to come before the Parliament straight away. It's under an existing act. It's a matter for the Cabinet and the Minister responsible. In this case, I think that would be Mark Furner, the Agriculture Minister, to put before Cabinet the necessary change to the regulations. And at Executive Council a few days later, the Governor will sign it, and everything that's needed to be done is done. So I'd like to see that happen post-haste.
So that's a few-day process, not a 3 month as we stand now, and we understand a few more weeks to come.
Certainly not. If a matter is urgent, I would say this is a flying minute can be done. Just a regulation signed by the Premier and the Minister, and the Governor could be made available to sign it that day. So, it's certainly nothing that should have taken months, and certainly should not take any more than a few days from now.
James Lister, I think I've caught you just outside of Stanthorpe. Is it raining right now?
Amy, it's not. It's just stopped where I am, but it's overcast and everything's wet. And I'm just heading back to my office in Stanthorpe. So I'll be interested to get some reports from my contacts around the electorate when I get before my desk.
Hope you enjoy a wet weekend. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Amy. All the best.
James Lister, who's driven from west of Goondiwindi now through to Stanthorpe, and there's been some nice rain to the east of Goondiwindi, although quite isolated. But Booba Sands has received 44 millimetres. Further north, Condamine, 25 mils in the gauge exactly. And then in central Queensland, I imagine around the Mount Og near Rolleston, 26 mils in the gauge. That is until 9 a.m. Since then, another 11 mils has been recorded north of Wallumbilla at Waikola Alert, and still sprinkling around the Goondiwindi area with another mil in the gauge. It's 12:15.
The Queensland Country Hour on ABC Radio Queensland.
Speaking of government news, the National Cabinet, in news to hand, has agreed to halve the number of people allowed into Australia each week and set up vaccine targets. International arrivals will now be capped at 3,000, just over 3,000 people a week, exactly half. Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, says that the Commonwealth, in response to this, would increase the number of repatriation flights. That was obviously something the Queensland Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk, was calling for. Let's talk about something completely different now. For years, we at the Country Hour have been bringing you stories of growing conflict between Queensland farmers and the coal seam gas industry. Most recently, a story from the Western Downs where a gas company drilled under private property without telling landholders. Since then, though, the ABC has been contacted by other farmers in the area who've been reluctant to speak until now. They say fear and division is being created in their community, and coal seam gas development could help some drought-proof their farms. Nathan Morris has this story.
As you drive past Ian Haylaw's sheds, there are 6 brand new grain silos. They glimmer in the sun.
We were always short of grain storage on this farm. It created issues, especially in years like this, with wet harvest. So we've now got 1,000 tonne of storage there.
It's an investment of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was money he could afford to spend thanks to contracts with a gas company to allow pipelines and gas wells to be built on his farm.
It's given us opportunity to improve our farm, make it safer, make it actually more enjoyable farming, because there's that bit of guaranteed income coming in which we've never had before in our lives.
On his property near Dalby, 200 kilometres west of Brisbane, Ian Haylaw grows grains, legumes and cotton. His land is on the productive Condamine floodplain, the same region where Arrow Energy is developing a $10 billion coal seam gas project, including thousands of wells drilled across 8,600 square kilometres.
Well, could I just get you to describe the scene in front of us here?
Well, this is one of our multi-well pads being drilled here. Obviously a lot of equipment, a lot of machinery.
For over 10 years, Arrow Energy has been discussing with landholders around here how it can minimise its impact on farmland. The decision was made to group wells at the edge of paddocks and then drill out at angles into the surrounding underground coal seams. It's called deviated drilling.
The beauty of it is there's 6 or 7 wells going in, 1.5 hectares of land, 1 pipeline in, 1 pipeline out and 1 access road. So minimal impact on our farming operation.
Ian Haylaw wasn't always so pro-gas. A decade ago, he was the chair of the Basin Sustainability Alliance, a landholder group that was pushing back against coal seam gas expansion.
Well, this is an aquifer connectivity research site. Our concern in the early days, back in the 2000s, was what risk was there of losing water from the Condamine alluvium into the Walloon coal measures that are being drained of water to release the gas. And yeah, we were really concerned about it, but I thought the only way we're going to understand it is to actually invest or get the companies and the government to invest in this sort of research site. But the best bit that we did here, I believe, for a farmer, was when we drilled that, it was actually a core sample taken from the surface right through the Condamine alluvium, through the transition zone into the coals. And, they brought it up and it was laid out on the ground, and you actually could look at all the different materials. There was, really dense clays, there was siltstones, mudstones, but we're actually able to feel this material when, a company says there's 10 metres or 50 metres of separation. You look at stuff that looks like concrete. You think, well, just looking at it, I can't see much water going through that. And then they had this really dense blue clay, which really sort of capped it off. And you think, well, to me that looks waterproof. But you talk to scientists, water will move through it, but at an incredibly slow rate.
So the concern I hear from other farmers very near to you is, and I can see that here looking at your property, you've got a pretty good looking crop of sorghum. There's a whole bunch of cotton bars behind that. Like, this is intensively farmed land. You're not concerned at all about having, wells in a grid around your farm?
No, what's under our farm belongs to the community. It belongs to the government, it belongs to the community. I have no right to say, no, you can't access the wealth under my farm.
But other farmers near Dalby are worried whether CSG extraction may cause their land to sink. It's a concern of Ian Haylor's too, and he's agreed to host a subsidence monitoring site on his property.
It's got to be very much a scientific debate. There's risk of subsidence from any aquifer you take water out of, and the modelling's saying very small amounts of subsidence, and if it's on an area-wide basis, I don't think it's going to have any impact on my farming operation. And I've spoke to people in other areas where the gas industry's been for 10 plus years, and they laughed at me when I said, well, what about subsidence? They said, we've seen nothing. We've never even been mentioned to us.
The counter perspective to that, and the perspective of other farmers in this area I've spoken to, is that those people that you might have talked to weren't on the Condamine floodplain, weren't on this flat alluvial soil, highly reactive soil that you are working in. They would say, how can you compare the two? They're completely different.
Well, one of the people I'm speaking to is on very flat irrigation country, on this similar, slightly lighter soil than this, but on the darker soils, a sort of a plain type area. And we can't answer that question 100%. So let's measure it, let's monitor it.
Rob Thompson has farmed west of Dalby for over 40 years. He likens the resistance to coal seam gas to the opposition the cotton industry faced back in the 80s.
And the funny thing about it is that nearly everyone that's taken a really strong negative position now against coal seam gas all grow cotton.
Rob hasn't signed any contracts with Arrow Energy yet, but believes many other producers are prepared to work with the company.
There's probably a majority of people that are prepared to accept it, that don't feel that it's going to have the dire consequences that some are predicting. And don't get me wrong, if I could choose not to have the coal seam gas in the area, I would.
Rob Thompson, he's a Dalby farmer, ending Nathan Morris's report. Well, speaking of cotton dividing communities, it's an industry which has made some big developments in North Queensland in recent years, with some of the country's largest growers trying their hand at the mostly untapped area. With the state government planning to release more water for irrigation on the Flinders River before the end of this year, and organisations studying the viability of a cotton gin, there's no doubt the industry's become more interested in the area in recent times. The Finley family from Wee Waa in New South Wales made the move north to Etta Plains Station near Julia Creek at the end of 2019 to develop irrigated cropping on the property. In the coming weeks, they're planning to harvest cotton there, which has been under irrigation for several months. Eric Barker spoke to Lucas Finley about the future of the industry in the northwest and the family's plans for further development on Etta Plains.
Irrigated crop of cotton this year in different row spacings and varieties, and we're pretty happy with what we're seeing at the moment.
So irrigated a crop of cotton. I understand that was kind of a bit of a greenfield site when you started. So what have you done to get set up for irrigation?
We had to bring laser buckets and earth moving equipment in there sort of August last year, and basically just had to move dirt to create a small irrigation farm.
So you've got sort of off-field storages that you're pumping out of the Flinders River?
Yeah, not right now, but during our stage 2, we're going to be building a storage, hopefully. We get that passed sort of in the next month, and then we'll be able to store water and then irrigate, more successfully, in the coming season.
What was it that attracted you to Etta Plains at the start?
We went looking around different, places around Northern Australia and whatnot, and it just looked like, the place, it had good soil. There was an irrigation licence attached to it. It's isolated, but it's not that isolated with Mount Isa and Townsville. overnight freight from those two destinations. 2.5 hours to a city centre like Mount Isa. Cloncurry is quite a good town. Julie Creek has a lot of stuff in it. Richmond and just the overwhelming support we felt, from the need and want for people like us to be here really brought us there, and we're happy. We're fully aware that we're not in northwest New South Wales, we're in northwest Queensland, so temperatures are different, humidity's different, the whole farming practices will be different, but something I like to tell people is there's soil, sunshine and rain, and there's that in abundance in North Queensland, and it's just a matter of us figuring out how to utilise that resource.
So you mentioned before, Lucas Finlay, that a crop of cotton is going to be coming off in the next couple of weeks. How's it looking?
It looks really good from what we've given it. We didn't have a storage, obviously, to continue to irrigate it, but we were more looking this year and just trying to figure out, the structure of the plant and whether or not it would grow there in these different conditions. And even before harvesting it, we're pretty happy with what we've had and think it's a success, regardless of the yield at the moment. But, we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks.
There's been a lot of talk about cotton moving into the north, both for North Queensland, Northern Territory and Western Australia, and the industry has been talking about it a bit. But how have you guys found it moving into the north in terms of the support from the people?
Well, when we first purchased the farm, we went straight down to the McKinlay Shire Council and basically asked the councillors straight, do you want us to be here? Because we will build this if we come. We're going to. Our whole intention is to put this water into production, and they overwhelmingly said yes. Everyone at the state, DNRME, Stockroutes, everyone's been quite supportive. SARA, state development, everyone's been very supportive of what we're doing, which is quite refreshing. And we found it, quite enjoyable to be up here, which has been fantastic.
Have you had much interest from other growers in New South Wales looking at coming up here?
Yeah, there's always people coming up and having a look, and I think there's people starting to get up here and move some dirt around and have a crack. But these things all take time, and I'm pretty confident that we'll build a farming system that works and just attract more people and then get the current producers, the current cattle guys to pivot their business to some sort of broadacre farming enterprise if they so choose. If they don't have to.
There's a couple of prospective things happening in the cropping industry. There is the idea of a cotton gin being bandied around by the Mount Isa to Townsville Economic Zone, who are hosting the forum that we're at today. Do you think the way the cotton industry is at the moment, there is grounds for a cotton gin soon?
Yeah, look, there's definitely hunger for it from producers and ginners alike, and if the crop can grow successfully, there'll certainly be a gin pop up somewhere close by, which will negate that huge 25 to 30% logistics costs we kind of spend now moving cotton from A to B, and I think something will happen.
What about water? There is some more water allocations coming up at the end of the year. Are Edda Plains after some more water?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll certainly look at that when we see the fine print on what they're going to be doing with that. But yeah, we'll just see what comes of it by the end of the year. Yep.
With the licence that you got at the moment, you mentioned before about off-stream storages, and I guess that being on your horizon. Do you have enough of a water allocation and everything you need to build them?
Yeah, no, we certainly do. We don't have the critical mass to build any, serious infrastructure that would change these areas, but there's enough licence to get in there and have a crack and take the risk of, exorbitant evaporation and seepage and just see what happens when we get on the ground and start building this stuff.
Lucas Finlay from Edda Plains, northeast of Cloncurry, formerly of New South Wales, having a crack at cotton in that part of the world. He was speaking to Eric Barker. Coming up on the program, a robotic dairy run by a third-generation family in the southeast is up for sale. You're going to hear why. That farm, really well known because it's also got agri-tourism as a side venture. You're going to hear why it's been put on the market. Right now, though, David Chen joins me with the latest in rural news. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Amy. Making news. The federal government has announced a permanent national firearms amnesty. The amnesty, which started yesterday, allows anyone in Australia to hand in unregistered or unwanted firearms to a police station or a licensed dealer without penalty for registration, sale or destruction. The previous amnesty, held over 3 months in 2017, resulted in over 57,000 firearms being handed in nationally. Water allocations have been released for irrigators in the Bundaberg region who've been under pressure from drought and reduced dam capacity. Those in the Burnett sub-scheme that's connected to the Paradise Dam, which had its wall reduced by 6 metres last year, dropping the capacity to below 50%, are at 22%. High priority allocations are at 100%. Sunwater says it hopes rainfall forecast for the drought-declared region in coming days will deliver inflows to allow for a boost to the announced allocations. And a Western Victorian farming family has recently witnessed a ewe give birth to 5 healthy lambs. The Harrington family says their supermum is only 2 years old and has now birthed a total of 7 lambs over the past 2 seasons. And Amy, you can see a video of the lambs if you head to the ABC's Landline Facebook page.
Oh my Lord, she's only 2. Chenny, thank you very much. I'm going to head to Kimber Wong now at the Weather Bureau. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How's it going?
Good. I'm having trouble working out who's going to get the most rain this afternoon. The radar's lit up, but there's not much happening. Nice showers scattered across the eastern half of our state. Who's going to have the best chance this afternoon, do you believe?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, Amy, and there is a little bit of activity on the radar. It is sort of patchy rain, showers and that sort of thing going on at the moment. There is a chance that we could see some thunderstorms develop through the afternoon period across eastern Queensland, east of that trough that we've got sitting over the interior at the moment. So with any of that, the thunderstorm activity is probably the highest chance of seeing any of those heavier falls coming through. But I think broadly speaking, Central Highlands and Coalfields looks like it's in pretty good position to see the higher totals through the day today. And generally speaking, across that district, we're looking at rainfall totals sort of 15 to 30 millimetres, scattered totals and isolated totals with any thunderstorm activity maybe sort of 50 millimetres plus if we get lucky or unlucky, I guess, depending on what you're looking for there. There is a very slight risk that we could see what we'd call training activity across the evening period from the southern Central Highlands down through the eastern Darling Downs tonight. And if we get that sort of activity, we could see sort of recurring showers and maybe the odd storm sort of moving over the same area sort of a couple of times in a row, if that makes sense, yep. Through the evening period. So sort of, going along the trough line roughly from north to south and getting a few showers and storms rolling over the same area. And in that case, we could see some high accumulations total across sort of rack up across that stretch of the world as well. But today it is looking like Central Highlands and Coalfields probably in the firing line to see some of the higher totals in the 24-hour period. Although just having a look at our rainfall from what we've had since 9 o'clock this morning, it's been pretty light, as you say, in most gauges across eastern Queensland. We have had a couple of locations across the southeast just picking up more than 10 millimetres now, but I think it's going to be sort of patchy rain coming through and just sort of steady accumulation, so it may not necessarily be heavy at any one time, which is probably good news. Tomorrow, it's looking like the trough is going to move through a little bit quicker than initially forecast, so our area of focus probably tomorrow is going to be more sort of eastern Central Highlands down through the Capricornia and into the Wide Bay Burnett coast as a focus for any potential heavier falls accumulating. And once again, rainfall totals sort of the order of maybe 30 to 50 millimetres may be possible through that stretch in sort of scattered sort of areas and in isolated pockets that see those higher totals starting to accumulate. We really couldn't rule out sort of totals in excess of maybe even 80 millimetres. So really nice to see these sorts of totals coming through, and hopefully it doesn't all come down in one go. At this stage it looks like it hopefully will be those sort of steady accumulations, but of course it's always a good idea to keep an eye on the radar and our warnings page just in case. Hopefully not causing too many issues. I hear it's sort of cane crushing time as well, so maybe a little bit unfortunate timing, but nevertheless we are looking at long-term deficiencies still in that part of the world, so really nice to see this rainfall coming through anyway.
Yeah, the Tully Mill just don't want to hear about another 400 mils over 2 days. That was incredible.
Well, no,
but it's certainly pulled back from that, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We've had a very much rapid decrease in the shower activity along the North Tropical Coast in the last 24 hours, and even to 9 a.m. this morning, I think the highest total in that part of the world was maybe 51 millimetres at Ingham, so it's definitely a significant decrease from the 150, 250 plus that we were seeing the previous couple of days.
Still, it just loves raining there. 50 mils
would
be what inland Queensland would beg for. So where's that trough sitting? So who will now not see any more rain from this lunch hour onwards?
That's a very good question. It's almost easier to summarise where we won't see rain maybe over the next couple of days. So the trough itself is now sitting roughly, if you draw a line from the Gregory Ranges down towards, I'm going to try and get some locations up here to make this more explicitly clear. So Gregory Ranges down between Barcaldine and Ralston, down through the Carnarvon Ranges, and the trough looks like it's probably east of Roma now. So east of Roma is probably the cutoff for where we'll see that rainfall, and east of that line essentially is where the rainfall is likely to be over the next couple of days, and through the day tomorrow as well, gradually contracting off to the east coast through the day as we get that dry air pushing in from the west in the wake of the trough.
And talking about winds, they're quite calm over inland areas, but there is it's blowing quite a lot in the Gulf. That's going to persist this weekend?
Yeah, look, we are expecting those winds to pick up across Western Queensland and into the Gulf overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning. So we have got a strong wind warning for the southeast Gulf waters for tomorrow morning, and that is likely to continue for the next couple of days as we get that big ridge of high pressure really strengthening up and pushing those southeasterlies through. And those stronger winds probably will make their way to our northeastern waters through the end of the weekend into early next week as well, as we get that ridge of high pressure building along the east coast once that trough moves offshore as well. So if you are planning to head out on the waters the next couple of days, certainly in our northern waters, today is probably the nice light winds. Tomorrow along the northeast coast will be another nice day wind-wise, and particularly for those taking advantage of reef conditions while it's school holidays. Tomorrow is going to be a lovely day for it, and then as we head through the early days of next week, we'll see those winds really strengthening up pretty much right along the east coast.
Kimber Wong, and when can we start to expect frost returning?
Well, probably from Monday morning, I'm thinking across the southern and southeast interiors, probably when we'll start to see frost in the morning periods becoming a little bit more of a feature of our weather. So we do have that dry air pushing in behind this trough. Once that trough and the cloud band moves offshore, we'll get that dry air pushing into the coast. So we'll probably start to see those minimum temperatures across the Darling Downs and Granite Belt, maybe even decreasing for Sunday morning a little bit, but properly spreading across most of the state for Monday morning will be probably the next cool day. I don't think it'll be like a massive cold snap. In fact, we have had our minimum temperatures riding pretty far above the average for this time of year with all this moisture in the air. So we're looking at those minimum temperatures pretty much coming back down to average for this time of year, or maybe a few degrees below average. But I guess that's kind of normal for winter, isn't it? We get these cold snaps come through and a little bit of frost returning to the interior. Yeah,
but no extremes, as you say. You're not predicting zeros for anywhere, not even Warwick or Stanthorpe for the next week coming. So we'll take that.
Yeah, not at this stage. We'll see how that dry air pushes through. If it looks like it's going to be a little bit drier with those clear skies and really light winds, there's almost no knowing exactly how cold it can get on the Granite Belt. I mean, we'll see if we'll drop down to zero. It's certainly a possibility.
Kimber Wong, thank you for your time. Have a good weekend.
My pleasure. Thank you.
It is nearly 20-1.
You're listening to the Queensland Country Hour on ABC Radio Queensland.
As you would have heard this morning, Brisbane and the Moreton regions remain in lockdown today to allow contact tracers time to identify the close contacts of 2 more COVID-positive residents. But Australia's chief vet says there's a significant probability that Australia will experience a major animal disease outbreak in the next 5 years as well. Could the ag sector do a better job of handling it than our experience with COVID, our human experience? Kath Sullivan's been looking at this issue. She spoke with Peter Somerville.
Some pretty interesting analysis has come out of, it's actually not just our chief vet, Dr. Mark Shipp, but a group of 16 biosecurity experts who have put out this estimate to say that there's a 42% probability that we will see a major internationally recognised animal disease such as African swine fever or foot and mouth disease in Australia in the next 5 years. So pretty scary stuff. In fact, Dr. Mark Shipp goes on to say in a written statement that's been provided to the ABC by the department that he hasn't seen this level of concern amongst experts generally at this level. So certainly a lot of fear there. They've put a couple of numbers on it, suggesting that there's a 21% probability, so about a 1 in 5 chance, that we'll have an African swine fever outbreak in Australia in the next 5 years. For African horse sickness, that probability drops to 13%. And for foot and mouth disease, it's 9%. So basically a 1 in 10 chance that we'll have foot and mouth in the country, and slightly less, an 8% probability of lumpy skin disease. All diseases in animals that would have huge ramifications, not just for the livestock sector, but for communities around the country.
Yeah, and a massive fallout.
Absolutely. We've been having a look at this for Landline on Sunday, and it's kind of interesting because last year MeatSafe, which is sort of a partnership between industry and government, put out this major review. Well, they didn't put it out publicly. They made this major review of the meat industries available to Australia's biosecurity officials with 5 major recommendations, including that all livestock be fitted with electronic ID. Now, of course, that's nothing new for cattle. That's been happening in that industry for about 20 years. It's also nothing new for Victoria's sheep industry. Tags have been mandatory. Electronic tags have been mandatory there since 2017. But for the rest of the country, it's a huge deal. It would also be a huge deal for other sectors like goats and alpacas to move to electronic ID. And that's all because of the ability to trace disease in the event of an outbreak. And you just have to look at our experience of COVID-19 in Australia over the past 18 months. Feels like we're now all affair with terms like QR codes and contact tracing.
And Kath, what's happened to those recommendations?
Yeah, well, MeatSafe actually put its review to Australia's biosecurity officials last year, and that recommendation to mandate EID was actually by 2025, a deadline that's fast approaching, and I dare say few people think that will be met at this rate. Another recommendation was to create a national administrator or regulator for Australia's livestock traceability, which is something at the moment that we see the states have leadership on. And I guess it can be likened to COVID. You know, speaking with one livestock agent in a Victorian sale yard setting, he suggested it's like we're not states at the moment, but we're all separate mini countries because everyone's going their own way on COVID. And he felt it was a bit similar with electronic ID in sheep, given that he sees sheep regularly cross state borders and that tag in their ears is worth nothing once they head into South Australia or New South Wales. To come back to those recommendations, the biosecurity officials have put it out to a working group which is chaired by Sarah Britton, New South Wales chief vet. She wouldn't give too much away, but said that she'd be putting options to the biosecurity officials, which is basically a committee made up of state bureaucrats. There's also a couple from New Zealand too, I think, saying how it might be that we could implement these recommendations. But at this stage, unfortunately, that's as far as we've been able to get in terms of determining whether or not we'll actually see these things come to light.
Traceability, important for human health and animal health, thanks to Kath Sullivan. It is nearly 1:45.
The Queensland Country Hour with Amy Phillips on ABC Radio Queensland.
Queensland's only robotic dairy is up for sale. Cows have been milked on the Dennis family farm since 1935. Located in the scenic rim, the dairy is also a popular agri-tourism destination, with an estimated 100,000 people now visiting in the past decade. The business's milk brand, For Real Milk, is also included in the sale. Third-generation farmer Greg Dennis discussed the motivation behind selling the well-known business with Lucy Cooper.
You know, it's a bit of a combination of factors, and we're just out of time and out of energy, to be honest. I mean, we've put an enormous a lot into, and when I say we, the Dennis family, my mum and dad, my auntie and uncle, myself, we've put an enormous effort into making everything happen and keeping it happening. But we're at a time in life where I desperately need to let my mum and dad, my auntie and uncle retire. You know, they are all still working too hard, and I'm not in a position to cover all bases and keep things operating. And at the end of the day, you know, we just haven't found a way to increase our milk sales to a level that would enable us to replace their labour input. So that's why, in some ways, it's bittersweet. You know, we couldn't quite make all the things happen that I had envisaged, but at the same time, it's a really exciting opportunity for somebody to come in and continue on with what I started.
It appears that you have quite a loyal clientele. For Real Milk on Facebook has 20,000 likes.
Sure.
And a product like For Real Milk, it's what consumers are demanding these days, that less processed, more natural version of a product. So then why are we not seeing that translate in the sales?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. We ask ourselves many times over recent years, how could we not get this rolling better? And I think it comes back to the fact that we never had the budget to market or promote.
I have to ask this question. What buyer is going to want to purchase the farm and the product that it comes with if we're not seeing those sales?
I think there's still massive upside potential to just strengthen what we started, and to, down the track, expansion is possible for Real Milk. There's no question about that. But we're just not that far away from seeing quite a profitable business operation. I couldn't figure out how to make that happen. And I think sometimes when you're in business and it becomes a case of not being able to see the forest for the trees. I mean, you're just too close to what's happening. I think that, fresh blood, new ideas and marketing strategies could see things turn the corner.
You've mentioned in your Facebook post that you have overseen the demise of a once profitable business, and then you attribute some of this to a broken system in Australia. Would you care to clarify what you mean by this?
I think we need to return some balance to the way businesses operate, because it's tough. It's tough for small businesses, and it's tough for farmers, farming families. We need to have a future for these operations. We need for them to not just be breaking even. We need those industries to remain profitable, because they're the biggest employers of wage earners in this country. And I think money circulates. If small business and family business are doing well, that's job opportunities, especially when it comes to agriculture. That is opportunities in rural and regional areas. And we're seeing people gravitate away from the country to the city because that's where the opportunities are. But that's not beneficial for the financial health of this country. There's been so many things out of our control, try hard as we did. Did I feel defeated and deflated? Yes, I did. Did I feel as though I failed my family? Yes, I do. That's unavoidable, and many farmers will have experienced those emotions. It maybe not that that's really justified, that I put that on myself, but it's human emotion, isn't it? We're dealing with human emotion, and I have the battles with those emotions at times, and I like to be thinking positively, but sometimes life gets in the way.
And you have said it is business as usual, and that is until you find a buyer. We got to put the hypothetical out there. What happens if you don't find a buyer?
I'm very confident that we will. I don't think that there's any risk of us not. So, the place is still available. It's on the market. We haven't signed anything yet, but the expressions of interest have been solid, and I'm not concerned about that happening. I think it's important for people to understand that it is business as usual. It's literally the farm is still operating, the factory is still operating, and my very strong desire is that all those supportive customers over the years, they still want to buy for Real Milk, and they still can, and they still will into the future.
Good luck with that transition, Greg Dennis. And while he's bowing out, a report today suggests that while most Australian dairy farms expect to actually return a profit this year, many, many people continue to join Greg on exiting the industry. For more, Peter Somerville spoke with Sophia Olmsted, a senior industry analyst at Dairy Australia.
88% of farm businesses across the country are anticipating making an operating profit in 2020-21. That's the highest number we've had since we started reporting on tracking this measurement.
Why is that?
The key reason for this turnaround has really been in that improvement in operating conditions at the farm gate, and improvement in seasonal conditions, easing of input costs, as well as a relatively strong farm gate milk price throughout this season, as well as a higher one heading into next year as well.
And some pretty promising milk prices ahead for farmers. How is that weighing on things?
Yeah, that's it. Opening prices for next season are mostly tracking at higher compared to where they've been this year. And that's really been supported by that ongoing fairly favourable global market fundamentals, as well as robust demand for dairy here in Australia.
But despite all of this, it seems production is still essentially stalled.
Yes, so we expect fairly modest result overall for this current season we're in. We expect it to wind up the year fairly stable compared to last year. And a key reason for that being the fact that we do have a small national dairy herd after several years of heavy culling with really challenging conditions leading up to those decisions. We also know that at the moment really strong land prices are encouraging some farm exits in combination with high beef prices. And we still have the challenge, as most agricultural industries does at the moment, related to labour.
Is that concerning that everything's looking so rosy, yet we can't really produce that much more milk?
We are thinking that we might see a potential increase in milk production next season. Our initial forecast is 0 to 2% growth relative to the current season we're in, as these favourable conditions really allow farmers to continue to take advantage of the improved operating conditions they're in.
You mentioned that farm exits are slowing production. Do you have any idea just how many people have exited the industry?
Well, we're still waiting for the final data to come through that we get from different state dairy authorities. We do have some indications there is probably slightly more than the norm, which has been around 3 to 4% farm exits per year. But the final numbers will come through around September.
Why are they leaving? What are they going to?
Well, there seems to be slightly more options for farmers at the moment compared to during the challenging years. For example, there are buyers of land across the country, which means that land values have gone up. There's also really high beef prices, which means that there is an opportunity to exit now and bring retirement decisions forward if you want to. The high beef prices have also encouraged some farmers to diverse into beef production, especially as the lack of available workers in the dairy sector really has provided a lot of challenges to produce milk.
Looking outside Australia, beyond our farm gates, what's happening globally?
Well, globally, milk supply has continued to grow as it has for most parts of the last year, but it's growing at a quite stable rate. And so far, demand is really able to keep up and absorb that additional milk produced and underpin current commodity prices.
That is, sorry, I just lost my place, Sophia Olmsted. She's with Dairy Australia. She's a senior industry analyst with that company. But as you just heard, there's never been more competition for milk between processors, and right now many dairy farmers are weighing up where they can send their milk this financial year. One tool that could offer fresh insights is the Milk Value Portal, the Milk Value Portal, which aims to help you as a farmer understand what's driving those farm gate milk prices. Janine Waller is the Executive Director at the Australian Dairy Products Federation. She told Josh Becker the tool will increase transparency between farmers and processors.
So what it does is it aggregates the data that we receive from processors. It lets a farmer go in and use the tool. So at the heart of the Milk Value Portal is a Farmgate Milk Value tool. So they enter their farm parameters, be it region, seasonality of supply, farm size, could be their fat and protein percentage, and it will give them a weighted average or a set of ranges for price that is paid for that region. So it will give them an idea based on their farm scenarios to what the price would be, but no, it's not individual prices that they may receive from the individual companies.
Do you think that at the moment we're seeing a lot of competition in the market? Do you think that's a key part of what's driving prices? We've seen a lot of processors revise their opening milk price so far this year. Or is the underlying commodity value the strength that's behind these high prices?
But definitely competition is playing a big factor. Obviously, there's only a limited amount of milk that's available. You've obviously got Bega that's taken over Lions, so you've got quite a strong player there, and also Coles that are seeking more milk volume for cheese. So competition is certainly there. You've got a softening Australian dollar, so that's playing into it. And as you said, commodity prices are stable. So all of those factors combined are really behind what's really driving a very strong opening price, particularly for the southern dairy regions.
If you want to check out this portal, go to milkvalue.com.au. Next, nothing to do with milk, rather. We're going to go shearing.
The Queensland Country Hour on ABC Radio Queensland.
A group of keen learner shearers are gathering at a shed outside Quilpie this week to hone their skills with the handpiece. The 2-week school, funded by the Quilpie Shire Council and Australia Wool Innovation, is being run by experienced shearer, former Charleville local Carl Goodman. While students may not be ready for their own stand at the end of this school, Carl told Madeline McCoskey it's a great foundation for those skills needed inside the shearing shed.
It was basically aimed at bush kids, like through Thargomindah, Quilpie, Charleville, St George, Cunnamulla, those places, just to see how much interest was in the shearing industry, and we got a fairly good supply. I think we've got about 13 out here now learning how to shear. We've just started off on Monday and we've got a few more turning up today. So we've got, a few people that go to school down below and then have came back on holidays and is doing the school because they've got sheep out on their place, or, they know a few people that work in the industry and they're probably, just testing the waters to see whether they like it or not.
As someone that's been in the industry for 36 years, as you said, how important are these kind of schools for a successful shearing industry into the future?
Mate, I just think it's a must at the moment. We don't really have a pathway into the wool industry. You look at all the other industries, they do a lot of advertisement and got a lot of promotion. There's a lot of support networks there for them. But as far as the wool industry, it's sort of like it was on its heels with the drought and the dingoes and the wool prices and things like that. And now those things are starting to turn around and, it's looking pretty positive. We certainly need, more young, keen shearers in the industry.
How are the kids going at the moment?
Yeah, mate. So what we do is we teach them how to crutch first, which is, that's a pretty big necessity, really. Today we've just started on the first part of shearing, so it's taken that billy wool off, and we'll just gradually move on to the next section, which is that hind leg, and then up the neck, your long blow, and down the last side.
Got any young gun shearers in the making there with you?
Oh, I don't know about young gun shearers, mate, but there's probably a couple there that think they are.
Confidence is key.
Very good.
And I guess, what are the hopes for the 12 or 13 learner shearers that you are working with this week at the end of the school? What are you hoping they can do after this?
Just all the basics, really. It's really like a starter school. It's just like swinging the door open and letting them see what's out there,
So should be ready for work at the end of it, you hope?
Well, mate, they can. They probably won't get a job shearing. They'll be more looking at shed handling side of things. So that's wool handling, picking up fleeces, sweeping, skirting fleeces on the table, things like that. And that'll keep them in the wool industry. And, that from then on you can move up the ladder and, start shearing or do a wool classes certificate, pressing. There's all sorts of different things.
Are you hoping there'll be more schools like this in the future that you can get involved in?
For sure and certain. Queensland is probably the forgotten state when it comes to, the wool industry, because there's not a great deal of sheep left, but, they're breeding up every year with decent seasons, so the demand will come for more shearers for sure. We are trying to hope to run another one in October.
What a privilege to learn from Carl Goodman, a Charleville shearer. I hope those kids on camp at the moment learning to shear are having a great week. That is just about it from me. Just a few more rainfall reports which have come in. Rhonda says 25 mils at her place at Bellevue, Gameri West. 13 mils of beautiful rain at James's Place at Placid Hills. The winner, though, is Tess Pemble with 48 mils at Allen Hills Station south of Homestead, 19 mils at Sapphire, says Barry. Kay reports 15 mils at Mount Jamble at the Stonelands. I hope it continues to fall at your place. Ali Felton Taylor will join you all next week, but for now, enjoy your weekend. News time, 1 o'clock.